The faint bite of acetone escaped the sealed solvent cabinet whenever the climate system changed pressure. Beneath it lay the drier scent of old linen, dust, and varnish, the honest smell of things that had survived longer than the stories told about them. I lowered the Raman spectrometer over the corner of a 19th century landscape and watched a red peak rise where no red peak belonged. Under the halogen lights, the painted sunset looked convincing. Under the laser, it confessed. "Modern pigment," I said. Camille Thomas stood behind the yellow line around my work table, holding a rigid folder against her chest. That was fast. The lie was lazy. "Then you have time for a visitor." The cooling fan inside the spectrometer wound down with a soft mechanical sigh. I recorded the spectrum, capped the sample vial, and kept my eyes on the monitor. "My schedule says I have time in November." "It's Monday, Julian." "Then November remains available." Camille tapped the folder twice against her palm. "Her name is Valerie Morgan. She owns the Vanguard Loft gallery. A collector named Elias Thomas filed for a temporary restraining order against the centerpiece of her Friday exhibition." My hand stopped above the keyboard. 2 years earlier, Elias had asked me to soften an authentication report. When I refused, he spread a contamination rumor that Camille's custody logs eventually disproved. "What does he want?" I asked. "The portrait. He claims it belonged to his family and was stolen decades ago. His settlement offer says he'll withdraw the application if Valerie surrenders it before Friday. He's offering less than 1/10 of its insured value." There it was, not a dispute, a lever. Camille placed 3 pages beside my keyboard, a court application set for Friday, an insurer's suspension of coverage on the portrait, and a board notice freezing the gala budget until Thursday at 6. Why not send the painting to a museum laboratory? The insurer won't authorize transport while ownership is disputed. Every other lab she called requires at least 3 weeks. She found your paper on mobile, non-destructive analysis. Flattering research does not create more hours in a week. A cashier's check might. Camille said it on the court papers. The amount covered 5 days on site, 2 technicians, an outside laboratory, and a rush report. Valerie had built a workable plan, and the man opposing her had already tried to damage my work once. Has she retained counsel? Mara Chen, commercial litigation and art title disputes. Has Chen approved independent sampling and the release of acquisition records? Valerie brought both authorizations. Camille's mouth tilted at one corner. Would you like me to tell her November is no longer available? I closed the false landscapes report and stood. Tell her she has 10 minutes. Generous. 9 now. The woman in reception wore a pink floral dress under a rain-darkened charcoal coat. Nothing about her posture asked for sympathy. A leather case lay open on her knees, divided by colored tabs. When I entered, she rose and offered her hand. Valerie Morgan. Julian Reed. Her grip was steady, and she did not waste our 10 minutes asking for sympathy. Elias Thomas wants the Ardell portrait, she said. His family tried to buy it from the Bell estate last year. The executor rejected him. I purchased it from the estate 8 months later through a documented sale. Elias now claims the estate never owned it. She opened the case to a certified bill of sale, probate authorization, export records, and the gallery's acquisition file. The painting cannot leave my building, she continued. The insurer has frozen transport approval. The board will cancel Friday's gala if coverage is not restored by Thursday evening. Canceling would trigger refunds, vendor penalties, and a loss of donor funding large enough to close my public program for the year. Why would authentication resolve an ownership claim? It won't resolve one by itself. Ms. Chen is handling title. Your report answers Elias's second allegation that the portrait is a recent forgery created to support a false estate record. He needs both allegations to make his application look urgent. What evidence did he file? A provenance log with a gap between 1938 and 1976, an affidavit from his family archivist, and a photograph too blurred to identify the painting. His lawyer says more documents will be delivered before Wednesday. His settlement offer expires tomorrow. I won't surrender the portrait. I can tell you whether the materials are consistent with the claimed period, I said. I can document restoration layers, compare the underdrawing with authenticated Ardell works, and maintain a chain of custody suitable for your lawyer. I cannot promise a result you want. I'm not buying a result. Valerie slid the check toward me. I'm buying a process that can survive questions. I turned toward the laboratory door. Camille, prepare the portable Raman unit, XRF analyzer, infrared camera, UV rig, evidence seals, and 2 calibrated humidity monitors. Valerie released one controlled breath. Ms. Morgan, I added, nothing is sampled without your written approval, and Ms. Chen's confirmation. If the evidence points against the painting, the report will say so. Good, she closed the document case. If it can't survive the truth, it shouldn't be on my wall. By late Monday afternoon, the Vanguard Loft gallery had become a temporary laboratory. Rain streaked the harbor windows, and the disputed portrait waited in a secure room with its evidence seal unbroken. Valerie signed the entry log before Camille cut the seal. Mara Chen joined us by video, confirmed the sampling limits, and watched Camille photograph every edge of the frame, stretcher, backing board, and fastener. The portrait showed a woman beside a narrow window, one hand resting in her lap. From a distance she looked calm. Up close, her mouth held the beginning of an argument. You don't like it, Valerie said. I checked the humidity monitor. I haven't tested it. That wasn't my question. Then it wasn't relevant. Valerie moved to the circuit panel. Tell me when you need the lights. First, I need to know who has access to this room. She handed me the time-stamped access log. Myself, Oliver Harris, the registrar, and security. Since the claim arrived, only the registrar and I have entered. Camille verified the log while magnification revealed natural craquelure and one lower band of different varnish. Lights off, I said. Valerie threw the switch. Violet light washed across the varnish, while the lower band remained dark. A later restoration? She asked. Possibly a different varnish or cleaning campaign. Your records may explain it. And if they don't? Then it becomes a question, not a verdict. When the lights came back, her gaze drifted past me to a cluster of photographs beside her office. Openings, artists, school groups, volunteers, and one small black frame that did not belong with the rest. In it, Valerie sat alone on a gray beach, looking beyond the camera into fog. An unusual choice for a gallery wall, I said. She followed my glance. It keeps me honest. About what? Her thumb pressed the access log. About the difference between looking composed and being all right. What do you need next? The complete conservation file, I said. Especially anything from the 1970s. I'll bring the archive boxes. Raman and XRF screening found period-consistent pigments, but could not name the artist or prove ownership. Valerie returned with 3 archive boxes, chamomile tea, black coffee, and sandwiches. No sugar, Valerie said, placing my coffee beside a closed case. Camille warned me. Your coffee order isn't confidential, Camille said. Your personality is still under review. Inside the second box, she found a 1976 invoice documenting synthetic varnish along the repaired lower edge. It matched the dark UV band. One question answered, she said. Proper records often do more work than dramatic speeches. You should embroider that on a pillow. I don't own decorative pillows. That explains more than you think. Tuesday morning began with infrared light and a new threat. Infrared imaging revealed that the woman's hand had first been sketched near her collar, then lowered into her lap. The marks resembled authenticated Ardell drawings, though resemblance was only supporting evidence. While Camille saved the images, Elias sent a lower settlement offer. He reduced the offer, she said. That seems contrary to negotiation. Oliver Harris entered before she could put the phone away. Tall, silver-haired, and usually measured. The board chair carried a folder so tightly that its corners had bent. 3 donors called, he said. Elias told them the painting may be evidence in a fraud investigation. Valerie's expression did not change. There is no fraud investigation. I know that they don't. Then tell them the court has scheduled a civil hearing. No agency has accused the gallery of fraud, and our independent examination is proceeding. Oliver glanced toward me. Can the board have something preliminary? An incomplete statement would cause more damage. You'll receive a signed report. Valerie stepped between him and the equipment line. The board needs accurate information. Send the statement I approved with Mara. Do not describe incomplete science. 6 o'clock Thursday remains the deadline, Oliver said before leaving. Valerie placed both palms on the archive table. What can I do that helps? I turned the infrared image toward her. Find photographs taken before 1976 and any shipping labels, exhibition stamps, or inventory numbers on the stretcher. The City Museum holds Ardell's dealer archive. Would they release scans in 48 hours? They will if I ask the right archivist. By noon, Valerie leaned over a glaring archive table with 2 fingers pressed to her temple. Without interrupting her call, I warmed the lights to amber and raised the room 2 degrees. Her hand lowered from her temple. 5 minutes later, she placed black coffee beside my notebook. Environmental compensation. Chamomile rose from her own cup as she reopened the ledger. Under linen tape on the stretcher, Valerie found a faded label, B17, and part of an ampersand. Bell Estate inventory? Camille asked. Valerie shook her head. Their numbers begin with a year. This looks like a dealer code. She searched the City Museum's catalog until her finger stopped on a 1938 exhibition list. Bexley and Rowe, Lot 17, an Ardell portrait lent by Dr. Samuel Vale. She requested certified installation photographs, the catalog card, and its insurance schedule, copying Mara on every message. That evening, Elias's courier delivered a sealed envelope to the front desk. Inside was an archivist's affidavit and a grainy 1941 photograph of a similar portrait. He says this is our painting, Valerie said. The window is on the wrong side, I said. The hand is raised near the collar. It may be another portrait from the series. Which means Elias may own a related work, Valerie said, but not necessarily this one. May I send this to Professor Sato? I asked. She cataloged Ardell's portrait series. I'll tell her only that we need a visual comparison. No names and no allegation without your approval. Valerie looked to the copy of Mara's authorization, then back to me. Send it. Copy Camille and preserve the original file. Before midnight, Professor Sato confirmed that Ardell painted 2 sisters in 1937. His appointment book listed Mrs. Thomas Study and Dr. Saval, finished portrait in consecutive weeks. Elias's family may have owned the study. The Vale portrait followed a different chain. He built his claim around the wrong sister, she said, or hoped no one would discover there were 2. She slid the page into a protective sleeve. Mara gets this tonight. The board gets it after she verifies the source. Wednesday arrived with clear skies and a headline designed to look like a verdict. Oliver waited with a tablet while Valerie spoke to Mara beneath the skylight. The Art Chronicle published a receipt, Oliver said. It says Valerie purchased reproduction paintings from a disgraced Paris dealer. The image was dated October 2010, yet its telephone number used a format introduced 4 years later. 1 fracture was not enough. Valerie ended her call. The reporter will preserve the original file and send it exactly as received. 2 board members want an emergency vote this afternoon, Oliver said. The scheduled vote remains Friday morning, Valerie said. An earlier vote would reward a leak we haven't examined. Then remind them our bylaws require notice and my opportunity to respond. I'll send the clause with Mara's statement, he said, leaving to make the call. Inside her office, Valerie sat beneath the black-framed beach photograph while my phone filled with questions from dealers. I switched it off. The receipt is dated before I owned the gallery, Valerie said, but I worked for an auction house in 2010. Elias wants people to believe I learned about forged Ardell works there and later planted one in the Bell Estate. Did you ever buy from the Paris dealer? No. My name appeared on a visitor list at one estate viewing. Do you have employment records and travel documents from that month? Payroll, passport scans, and the auction house calendar. I was in Boston that day. She removed a tabbed folder marked 2010, prepared during the acquisition review. You kept 16-year-old payroll records? I keep everything connected to provenance. You may be the first gallery owner whose filing system has improved my opinion of humanity. Careful. That sounded almost warm. An email from the Chronicle arrived. Mara forwarded the original PDF along with written permission for forensic review. Camille hashed a read-only copy and logged it. The PDF was exported last Friday with software that did not exist in 2010. A scanned old receipt could have been placed into a new PDF, Valerie said. Correct, Camille replied. So the export date alone proves nothing about the paper. But this does. She enlarged a pale rectangle around the signature. The letterhead and signature were inserted separately. The font was released in 2016 and the telephone format in 2014. Can you certify that? Valerie asked. I can document the digital findings, Camille said. For court, Mara should retain an independent document examiner who can reproduce them. Valerie immediately sent the file hashlog and images to an accredited examiner under a new custody receipt. The Chronicle updated the article to state that the document's authenticity was disputed. It was not a retraction, but the headline no longer stood alone. Oliver returned carrying a printed email from the board. The early vote is canceled, Friday at 9, here in the gallery. Elias and his counsel have accepted the invitation to present their claim. Valerie bent the page slightly between her fingers. Good. Now everyone will hear the same evidence. I moved the chamomile cup away from the edge before it could fall, then placed the museum request list in front of her. One item at a time, I said, archive scans, title chart, or laboratory results. Which one do you want? Valerie looked from the list to the phone. The museum. I can get the insurance schedule. Then I'll finish the spectral comparison. Camille will stay on the document examiner. She picked up the phone and called the archivist. At 3:17, certified 1938 scans showed the veil portrait with the same repaired edge and diagonal frame scrape. The catalog card traced it from Dr. Vale to his daughter and through a recorded 1962 sale to the Bell family. Mara connected that record to Valerie's probate authorization. Valerie stood beside the monitor, studying the photograph. That scrape is still there. Damage can be more useful than beauty. You really should not embroider pillows. Her surprised laugh followed me back to the spectrometer. Thursday, Camille returned with a sealed laboratory report. Infrared analysis matched the lower varnish to the 1976 invoice, while a loose fiber from inside the frame showed age and weave consistent with the documented canvas. Combined with the underdrawing, pigments, archive photograph, dealer label, and title records, the evidence formed a defensible whole. I wrote the conclusion carefully. The physical and documentary evidence is mutually consistent with the work identified in the 1938 Bexley and Rowe exhibition record. No tested material requires a date later than the documented conservation campaign. These findings support attribution and materially contradict the allegation of recent manufacture. Valerie read the draft with a red pen. Paragraph 6 says the Thomas study is different, she said. Specify the raised hand, opposite window, and smaller canvas dimensions. Elias will argue that difference is subjective. I revised it, and Camille added the museum certification number to our exhibit list. The chain of title chart belongs to Mara, not your report, Valerie continued. Reference it as a separate legal exhibit so no one thinks you're offering an ownership opinion. You review expert reports like an expert. I've spent 10 years learning which questions cost the most when no one asks them. At noon, Elias sent a new offer. He would withdraw his request for the TRO if Valerie transferred the portrait to neutral storage for 6 months, canceled the gala, and agreed not to release the document examiner's findings. She read it once, then forwarded it to Mara with a one-line instruction. Reject. Proceed with Friday's hearing. Oliver watched from the doorway. The old board would have accepted his first settlement. I'm sorry. Vote differently tomorrow, Valerie said. When he had gone, she signed the client acknowledgement on my report and handed it back. May I give the final report to Mara and the insurer? I asked. Yes. Send the insurer the technical report without my employment records. Mara receives the complete litigation package. Camille logged both releases. That evening, the insurer agreed to restore coverage if the court denied the TRO or approved secure display. Staff returned to preparing the exhibition, while a florist argued cheerfully with a ladder. Valerie carried 2 glasses of sparkling water into the viewing room. Condensation cooled my palm when she handed one to me. Your invoice is scheduled for payment tomorrow morning, she said. Regardless of the board vote or court ruling, that was already in the agreement. I wanted it said aloud. What happens next does not change what you earned. She raised her glass toward the portrait. 2 questions answered honestly. Several questions remain. You could try saying to us like a normal person. I have not authenticated normal. Her laugh returned, quieter this time. The bubbles in the glass touched my knuckles as I lifted it. To a defensible process, I said. I'll take it. Friday morning brought hard sunlight through the skylights and 9 people into the main gallery. 5 board members sat in a semicircle. Oliver occupied the center chair with the bylaws open in front of him. Elias Thomas stood near the disputed portrait in a dark suit, accompanied by his attorney. Mara Chen joined Valerie at the evidence table. Camille checked the presentation files, while I positioned the monitor so every board member could see without approaching the painting. Valerie wore the same pink floral dress from Monday, now beneath a fitted navy jacket. She placed the cashier's check receipt, engagement letter, and consent forms beside Mara's title chart. The message was simple. She had not bought a favorable opinion. She had purchased documented work. Oliver called the meeting to order. Elias spoke first. He described a family painting lost through careless estate handling. He showed the grainy 1941 dining room photograph and called the Vanguard portrait a manufactured substitute. His voice remained smooth until Mara asked him to identify which of the 2 Ardell sisters appeared in his family photograph. There was only one portrait, he said. Valerie stood. There were 2. She placed Professor Sato's catalog page on the monitor. The Thomas study with the raised hand and window on the left. The Vale portrait with the lowered hand and window on the right. Your family may have a legitimate interest in locating the study, Valerie said. This gallery does not possess it. The work you claimed is documented separately from 1938 through the Bell Estate's authorized sale to Vanguard. Elias's attorney leaned close and whispered to him. Valerie did not look at me for permission to continue. The receipt given to the Art Chronicle is also false, she said. It bears a 2010 date, a telephone format introduced in 2014, a font released in 2016, and a signature placed as a separate composite layer. An independent examiner has reproduced those findings in a signed declaration filed with the court. Camille displayed the hash log, the examiner's comparison, and the Chronicle's transmission record. Each step had a name, a time, and a custody receipt. Elias's polished expression thinned. A modern PDF proves nothing about an old receipt. Correct, Camille said. That is why the examiner analyzed the embedded layers and the anachronistic printed elements, not merely the export date. Then it was my turn. The UV images appeared first, followed by Raman spectra, XRF tables, infrared underdrawing, the conservation invoice, and the laboratory analysis of the lower edge varnish. I explained what each test supported and, just as important, what it could not prove alone. No single pigment authenticates a painting. I told the board, no pentimento names an artist, no archive photograph establishes current ownership by itself. The conclusion rests on independent evidence converging, period-consistent materials, a restoration matching the 1976 invoice, an underdrawing consistent with the Vale composition, the original dealer label, a certified 1938 installation photograph, and an unbroken documentary transfer into the Bell estate. The final slide showed the two portraits side by side. Elias's family study raised its hand toward the collar. Valerie's portrait rested its hand in the lap. "They are related," I said. "They are not the same object." Silence spread beneath the timber beams. Oliver looked toward Elias. "Do you have evidence connecting your family to the Vale portrait rather than the study?" Elias closed his leather folder. "This board is allowing itself to be manipulated by hired specialists." Valerie stepped around the evidence table. "Every specialist's engagement, payment, method, and limitation is disclosed," she said. "Your affidavit omitted the second portrait. Your source supplied a fabricated receipt to the press. If you have authentic evidence, submit it through counsel. If you do not, stop using my gallery's reputation to pressure me into transferring an asset you could not purchase." Her words did not rise in volume. They did not need to. Mara slid a document across the table to Elias's attorney. "This is our supplemental filing and request for fees. The court has the examiner's declaration, the museum certification, the Bell probate record, and Mr. Reed's report." Elias's attorney read the first page. The color left his face before it left Elias's. Oliver called for the board vote. 5 hands rose to maintain the exhibition, restore the gala budget, and authorize Valerie to continue the defense. No apology substituted for the vote. The decision itself did the work. At 11:30, Mara opened the secure court link in Valerie's office. The judge reviewed the filings, questioned both lawyers, and denied Elias's request for a temporary restraining order. The ruling did not declare criminal guilt or award final damages. It stated that Elias had not shown a likelihood of success, that Vanguard's documentary record was substantial, and that the disputed receipt raised serious credibility concerns requiring explanation. His attorney requested time to confer. By 2 o'clock, Mara received a signed notice abandoning the ownership claim and an agreement to preserve all source files. The request for fees and any further action concerning the fabricated receipt would proceed through counsel. The Chronicle published a correction stating that the document it had received was inauthentic and that no evidence connected Valerie to the Paris dealer. The legal system did not end with a torn sheet of paper or a dramatic exit. It ended that afternoon with docket numbers, signed filings, and a correction the public could read. At 4, the first gala guests were still 3 hours away. Staff crossed the polished floor with trays, labels, and extension cords. The portrait hung behind a security rail beneath its restored insurance certificate. My equipment cases stood packed beside the viewing room. The invoice had cleared. The 5-day engagement was complete. Oliver approached with Mara and a thin folder. "The board would like to offer you a permanent retainer," he said. "Non-exclusive, subject to conflict review." Mara drafted it. Valerie remained across the room speaking with the registrar. She did not watch my answer. I read the first page, then closed the folder. "I'll have independent counsel review it next week." Oliver smiled. "That may be the most reassuring answer you could have given." When they walked away, Valerie entered her office and stood before the small beach photograph. Her fingers lifted the frame from its nail. A pale square remained on the brick where sunlight had not reached. She carried the photograph into the viewing room and found me fastening the last Pelican case. "That was taken the year my former partner emptied our first gallery account," she said. "I spent 6 months rebuilding with borrowed walls and artists who let me pay them late. I kept the picture because I never wanted polished rooms to make me forget what collapse looked like." The case latch clicked under my hand. "Today didn't erase that year," she continued, "but it proved the picture doesn't get the final word." She pointed toward the empty nail. "Can I replace that sad picture now?" My fingers remained on the closed latch. All week, every useful answer had come from evidence, procedure, or a limit stated clearly. This question offered none of those protections. The old response waited. Finish the job, take the cases, return to the basement laboratory where every relationship had a custody form. Instead, I set the case back on the floor. Yes, I said, but I need to make one thing clear first. Her smile faded into careful attention. If the board's retainer survives legal review, it will remain professional. Your invoice is paid. The case is finished. What I ask next has nothing to do with your gallery, your contract, or whether I work here again. Valerie folded both hands around the frame. All right. I was going to leave before the gala. I assumed you would. I changed my mind. The room seemed to hold the soft rattle of glassware from the main floor. I would like to stay, I said, not as your authenticator, as the man who wants to take you to dinner when tonight is over. For once, Valerie Morgan had no tabbed folder ready. Her eyes widened. The black frame shifted against her palms. Then she crossed the space between us and placed the sad photograph face down on the work table. Dinner is too vague, she said. Saturday, 7 o'clock. There's a small place on Harbor Street. No donors, no board members, and no paintings requiring scientific analysis. You made a reservation? On Wednesday? That suggests confidence unsupported by evidence. I had evidence. Her gaze dropped to the unopened equipment case, then returned to mine. You kept finding reasons to stay. My answer caught behind a breath. She offered her hand, not as a client sealing an agreement, but open, patient, and easy to refuse. For tonight, she said, will you come into the gallery with me? I took it. The contact was brief, warm, and steady. She led me through the viewing room door, then released my hand before we reached the first guests. At the center of the gallery, Oliver tapped a glass and welcomed the crowd. He credited the staff, the museum archive, Camille's document work, Mara's legal team, and Valerie's refusal to trade accuracy for speed. When he mentioned my report, Valerie looked across the room at me with a smile meant for one person rather than an audience. Later, she introduced me to an artist as Julian, who is staying for reasons unrelated to pigment. Unverified reasons, I corrected. Dinner tomorrow, she told the artist. Independent review pending. The artist laughed. So did I, a sound unfamiliar enough that Camille turned from across the room to make sure it had come from me. 6 weeks later, the faint dusty sweetness of aging canvas greeted me when I opened the new climate-controlled workroom at Vanguard. My independent counsel had approved a limited, non-exclusive retainer with written conflict protections. I worked at the gallery 2 days a week and kept my laboratory across town. Valerie never approved my conclusions, and I never approved her acquisitions. Boundaries did not weaken what had grown between us. They gave it room to be chosen. The Ardell portrait remained on loan to the exhibition under a clean title record. The Chronicle correction stayed attached to the original article. Mara's fee application and the document matter continued through the proper channels, slow and documented. Oliver's board adopted a new review policy requiring verified evidence before emergency funding votes. Camille adopted the warm corner of the gallery workroom and claimed it improved her concentration. A chamomile mug now sat beside the black coffee cup on the shelf, both far from the instruments. Valerie called me into her office before the evening donor tour. The black-framed beach photograph no longer hung beside the door. In its place was a picture from the Friday gala. Valerie stood beneath the skylight laughing at something outside the frame. I was beside her, not touching her, but turned toward her instead of the camera. Behind us, the Ardell portrait caught a narrow band of winter light. The registrar took it, she said. I asked before I printed it. The color balance is slightly warm. Julian, it's a good photograph. She moved beside me and slipped her fingers through mine. The donor tour waited beyond the office door, close enough to hear when she spoke. Ready? She asked. On the wall, the woman I had met 6 weeks earlier was no longer being asked to prove she had survived. The new photograph showed what came after survival: work restored, truth documented, and 2 people standing in the same light because both had chosen to remain there. I squeezed Valerie's hand once. Ready? Together, we opened the door. The end. Closing thoughts. Core lesson. Trust is not built by ignoring questions. It grows when two people answer difficult questions honestly, respect each other's boundaries, and keep choosing the next practical step together. Green flag. Julian never promised Valerie a result he could not guarantee, and Valerie never asked him to compromise his work. Their relationship began only after the paid assignment was complete, with a separate invitation that both of them were free to accept or decline. Like and subscribe. If someone proved they cared through quiet, consistent actions instead of grand promises, would you be brave enough to let them stay? Share your answer in the comments, and please like and subscribe for more wholesome romance stories.